Electricity can become so cheap that power producers pay someone else to take it. That sounds like the dream. It is actually the beginning of a much stranger problem. For most of modern history, electricity was valuable because making it required burning fuel, spinning turbines, operating large power plants, and delivering the result through a giant network of wires. Solar changes part of that equation. Once a solar farm is built, sunlight does not send an invoice. When the sun is strong, thousands or millions of panels can produce electricity at the same time. And because the power grid has to balance supply and demand almost instantly, too much electricity can become a problem just as surely as too little. This is not a future theory. Wholesale electricity prices can fall below zero. In that situation, a generator can effectively pay a buyer to take electricity off the system. California already shows what this looks like at scale. In 2024, the California Independent System Operator curtailed 3.4 million megawatt-hours of utility-scale wind and solar energy. Curtailment means available generation was deliberately reduced because the grid could not use all of it at that moment. That was 29% more curtailed energy than the year before, and solar accounted for 93% of the total. Think about the contradiction. The world spends enormous amounts of money building clean power plants. Then, on certain bright spring afternoons, some of that electricity can become so abundant that the grid tells those plants to stop producing. The problem is not that the energy has no value. The problem is that the energy arrived at the wrong time. Electricity is one of the strangest products humans sell because supply and demand have to meet continuously. A warehouse can hold unsold shoes. A grain silo can hold wheat. A fuel tank can hold gasoline. A traditional power grid cannot simply stack Tuesday afternoon's extra electricity in a corner and sell it after sunset. That turns cheap electricity into a logistics problem. And once you see the grid that way, the next part becomes obvious. If electricity is plentiful at noon and scarce at 8 p.m., the valuable machine is no longer just the machine that creates power. It is the machine that moves power through time. That machine is a battery. Inside the California Independent System Operator, utility-scale solar capacity reached about 25 gigawatts by April 2026, up 19% from April 2024. Over the same period, net battery storage capacity climbed 79% to about 16 gigawatts. Those batteries can charge when solar production is high, then send electricity back to the grid later when the sun is disappearing and homes are still using air conditioners, lights, televisions, computers, ovens, and chargers. In the first 5 months of 2026, battery discharge in that California system was 3 times what it had been during the same period in 2024. So one answer to ultra-cheap electricity is simple: save it. But batteries do not make the problem disappear. They change the economics of the problem. Now the question becomes how much storage to build, how long it needs to last, where to connect it, when to charge it, when to discharge it, and whether the transmission network can move the electricity to the places that need it. And there is another twist. Even if the wholesale price of electricity collapses for a few hours, that does not mean your household power bill collapses with it. Your electric bill is not simply a receipt for electrons. Retail electricity prices can include the cost of generating power, but they also include transmission, local distribution, taxes, fees, maintenance, and the infrastructure required to deliver electricity reliably to homes and businesses. That means a grid can have moments when wholesale electricity is extremely cheap, while households still pay significant retail rates. In fact, the wires can become more important as the electricity itself becomes cheaper. A giant solar project is not very useful if the transmission line carrying its power is already full. A battery cannot help a distant city if the network cannot move enough energy between them. A neighborhood full of electric cars may need upgraded transformers, even if those cars are charging during hours when electricity generation is inexpensive. So the second answer to cheap electricity is not another power plant. It is more grid, more transmission, more substations, more storage, smarter controls, better coordination. And that leads to the third answer, which may be the strangest of all. Instead of moving electricity to match demand, we can sometimes move demand to match electricity. A car does not always need to charge the second it gets plugged in. A water heater can heat water before it is needed. A building can sometimes shift some heating or cooling to a cheaper hour. Factories with flexible processes can schedule certain energy-intensive work when power is abundant. The Department of Energy describes this kind of flexibility as a way for electrified equipment to respond to price signals and shift electricity use toward times when power is cheaper or excess solar is available. At that point, the grid starts behaving less like a one-way utility and more like a giant coordinated marketplace. Millions of devices are no longer just consuming electricity, they are choosing when to consume it. That matters because solar does not merely reduce the price of electricity, it changes the shape of the day. Solar production rises after sunrise, becomes strongest around midday, then falls toward evening. But human electricity demand does not perfectly follow the sun. People return home, air conditioners keep running, dinner gets cooked, cars get plugged in, lights switch on. The result is a steep change in what the rest of the grid has to provide after solar output falls. This pattern is often called the duck curve, and it is spreading beyond California. In New York, the Energy Information Administration found that increasing small-scale solar had changed the daily shape of metered electricity demand. During March and April of 2018, demand increased by an average of 850 megawatts between 8 in the morning and 11 in the morning. By 2026, demand during that same 3-hour period was instead falling by an average of 923 megawatts. Then came the evening. Between 4 and 7 p.m., average demand increased by 681 megawatts during those spring months in 2018. By 2026, the increase during that same 3-hour period had grown to 2,221 megawatts. Cheap solar had not eliminated the need for the grid, it had moved the difficult part of the day. This is why the phrase cheap electricity can be misleading. There is the cost of producing a unit of electricity. There is the cost of having that electricity available at the exact second people want it. And there is the cost of building an entire system capable of moving, storing, balancing, and delivering it. Those are not the same thing. Now push the idea further. Suppose solar panels and batteries keep getting deployed. Suppose electric vehicles, heat pumps, data centers, factories, and other electrical loads keep increasing. The grid could enter a world where electricity has radically different value from one hour to the next. At noon, an extra unit of electricity might be nearly worthless in one location. At 7 p.m., that same unit could be extremely valuable. Suddenly, time becomes part of the price. A home battery is not just buying electricity, it is buying time. A transmission line is not just moving electricity, it is moving value from one location to another. A smart charger is not just filling a battery, it is deciding which hour is worth buying. And an industrial plant that can shift production may gain an advantage simply because it can wait for the grid to become cheap. This creates a completely different kind of energy economy. For more than a century, the central challenge was producing enough electricity. The next challenge may be coordinating an abundance that arrives unevenly. That could change what gets built. More batteries become useful because they can move energy from midday into evening. More transmission becomes useful because one region's surplus can help another region. More flexible demand becomes useful because the cheapest electricity is often the electricity you can use exactly when the grid wants you to use it. And pricing becomes more important because a flat price sends almost no information about whether electricity is scarce or overflowing at a particular hour. This does not mean every customer should suddenly become an electricity trader. It means the machines around us can increasingly make those timing decisions in the background. An electric car can wait. A battery can charge. A water heater can preheat. A commercial building can adjust. A grid operator can coordinate thousands of resources that each look small but become enormous when combined. The future power system may therefore have a surprising goal, not simply to make electricity cheaper, to make electricity flexible. Because the cheapest possible power plant is not enough if its electricity arrives when nobody can use it. The cheapest battery is not enough if the grid cannot connect it. The strongest transmission line is not enough if demand remains locked to the wrong hours. And free wholesale electricity for 20 minutes does not make an entire power system free. That is the hidden cost of abundance. When energy becomes extremely cheap at the moment it is produced, the expensive part shifts somewhere else. Into storage, into wires, into control systems, into reliability, into the ability to move demand from one hour to another. So the energy revolution may end with a strange reversal. For generations, we treated electricity itself as the scarce thing. In a grid flooded with solar at certain hours, electricity may no longer be the scarce thing. The scarce thing may be the ability to use it at the right time. And if that happens, the most valuable part of the future grid will not always be the machine that makes power. It will be the machine, the wire, the building, or the person that knows when to take it.